Hello everybody. So we have been seeing various modules in the spine section, and today we will be discussing about one of the most interesting topic, which is the cord syndromes. So what are cord syndromes? Before going into the actual pathology and clinical presentation and management of cord syndromes, we have to know the anatomy of the spinal cord and the tracts. Just a basic brush through, though you all might be knowing about the same. The spinothalamic tract. We all know that the spinothalamic tract is nothing but a sensory tract. So there are two types of spinothalamic tract. One is the anterior spinothalamic tract, the other one is the lateral spinothalamic tract. Of these two, the lateral spinothalamic tract is the important one. So how does this happen? So from various receptors in the skin, the fibers, they pass through the spinal cord, through the neurons into the spinal cord. So once they come to the spinal cord, they cross to the opposite side, as you can see here, and then they ascend up. So some fibers may ascend up along the same segment or one or two segments above, and then they may cross to the opposite side, and then they will ascend up. So the majority of the fibers will pass through the lateral spinothalamic tract, and rest of the fibers will pass along the anterior spinothalamic tract. Basically, the spinothalamic tract is responsible for carrying the pain and temperature sensation from different parts of the body. So this is very important. And finally, the tract will go to the brain, and it will go to the corresponding cortical areas in the brain for pain or temperature perception. So this is the anatomy of the spinothalamic tract, otherwise called as the sensory tract, otherwise called as the ascending tracts. The next most important tract is the corticospinal tract, or otherwise called as the pyramidal tract, or otherwise called as the motor tract. As the name indicates, it is from the cortex to the spinal cord. And secondly, as the name indicates, it is called as pyramidal tract because basically it forms a pyramid when it decussates at this area at the level of medulla oblongata, just below the medulla oblongata. That is why it is called as pyramidal tract, and it is responsible for all the motor pathways and motor mechanisms of our body. So basically the fibers from various parts of the cerebral cortex, they pass along the same side, and at the level or below the level of medulla oblongata, at the level of pyramid, they decussate to the opposite side and they come down. And when they are decussating, 80% of the fibers passes along the lateral part of the spinal cord. That is why it is called as the lateral corticospinal tract, whereas 20% of the fibers passes anteriorly. That is why it is called as anterior corticospinal tract. The next most important tract is otherwise called as tract of Gall and Borda, or fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus, otherwise called as the posterior column tracts. So as the name indicates, these tracts, they pass along the posterior column of the spinal cord. For example, as you can see here, the fine touch receptor are present in the sole of the foot, and from there it goes all along the posterior aspect. It goes along the dorsal root ganglion, and the dorsal root of the spinal nerve goes to the spinal cord, and then it ascends up. So the fibers from the lower limbs are called as the fasciculus gracilis, and fibers from the upper limb is called as the fasciculus cuneatus. You can remember as C for C, cuneatus for cervical spinal cord. So the fibers from the cervical spinal cord, they form the fasciculus cuneatus, and they all go along the spinal cord, and at the level of medulla oblongata, they cross towards the opposite side, and then they ascend to the brain and the cortical region. Here again, the point which you have to note down is they cross at the level of medulla oblongata, and similar to the corticospinal tract, which crosses at the level of medulla oblongata, whereas the lateral and anterior spinothalamic tracts, mainly the spinothalamic tracts, they cross at the level of the spinal cord itself. Maybe one or two segments in the spinal cord, but they will cross at the spinal cord itself. They do not ascend up in the same side till the brain. So this is the main importance between these tracts. Now coming to the cross-section view of the spinal cord and the alignment of the tracts. Again, this is very important slide. So you can see there are motor and descending pathways. Motor pathways are the descending pathways, and they are represented as red in this picture. The predominant motor pathways, as I said, are the pyramidal tracts, which is the lateral corticospinal tract and the anterior corticospinal tract. And there are some other things called as the extrapyramidal tracts, which are the rubrospinal tract, reticulospinal tract, olivospinal tract and vestibulospinal tract. I am not going to talk about all these tracts today in this session because these will be dealt in detail in your neurology modules. We are going to concentrate only about the pyramidal tracts in the motor pathways. Similarly, the sensory pathways are otherwise called as ascending pathways or afferent pathways because it is from the periphery towards the brain. And the most important tracts are the anterolateral system, which is the anterior and lateral spinothalamic tract, and the dorsal column tracts, that is the fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. We will not be talking about the spinocerebellar tracts in this module. So this is very, very important. The next most important thing in this particular slide is the orientation of fibers of different parts of the body in the tracts. So for example, if you are going to take the lateral spinothalamic tract here, can you see it is marked as cervical, thoracic, lumbar and sacral. In other words, it can be named as CTLS from medial to lateral. I will talk the importance about this in the lateral slides when we are discussing about different cord syndromes. But as of now, you have to understand that both the pyramidal tracts and the spinothalamic tracts, the fibers are arranged as CTLS from medial to lateral. Whereas the tract of Gall and Buddha or the fasciculus gracilis and cuneatus will be arranged from sacral, lumbar, thoracic and cervical. So that is very, very important. This difference is very important because this will determine the clinical presentation. That is how a patient will present, which lower limb, whether the upper limbs will be more involved or the lower limbs. So all these things we will be discussing in detail when we are going to discuss individual cord syndromes. So again I am repeating, the spinothalamic tract and the motor tracts, the alignment will be CTLS from medial to lateral.